Hey everyone, I'm Casey, and in this video I'm going to talk about Callaway stock and why I think it is a pretty good investment. Now granted, this is just an opinion, this is not financial advice. I'm just talking about why I like the stock, why I own it, and I believe it's a pretty good investment. So first and foremost, and we're going to get into some technical analysis later in this video by looking at the chart and looking at what's going on in the last several months, but to give some brief perspective before we dive into the evidence and the facts that show, in my opinion, why it's a good investment. Callaway stock is still down 15.7% since January, basically from the pandemic. Now, and I'll be putting up some screenshots while I talk throughout this whole video, but I do not believe the pandemic has necessarily hurt Callaway. On the contrary, I think it's actually helped golf. Now, before we get into the technical analysis, like I said, I'll go through a bunch of the reasons of why I think if you're going to invest in the two main public companies related to golf, which are Titleist and Callaway, I prefer Callaway. So first and foremost, for those of you who aren't familiar with golf, don't worry, you don't necessarily have to be interested in golf at all to understand why this is a good investment, and some of the things that are super relevant, I'll explain why they are important. So first and foremost, the reason why I mention that is if you're not familiar with Topgolf, Callaway owns 14% of it, which is pretty substantial, especially considering there's rumors that Topgolf may be going public and having an IPO in the next several years, which would definitely benefit Callaway. An important part of mentioning that, not only from the equity side, is how Topgolf has been revolutionizing and, in my opinion, increasing the overall amount of people that play golf. Now, it's a way that people my age, young to mid to old 20s or 30 or young 30s, just the younger demographic of people who may not originally be interested in golf, they don't want to go pay $20 to $50 for a 9-hole or an 18-hole round and buy clubs and the investment of like actually playing golf. They can go to a place like Topgolf, which is essentially an arcade style driving range that has food and drinks and is more of a fun atmosphere than necessarily going out and playing the game of golf. But it can still, most importantly, why I mention it, hook people into the game of golf and get them interested in it and want to actually go play it for real. Now, as I mentioned, how I don't necessarily believe that the pandemic hurt Callaway as much as the stock price reflected is because it has the brand Strata, which a lot of people may not know is owned by Callaway, is the number one and number two, number one being men's and number two being women's, seller on Amazon. And as we know, Amazon's been on fire lately during the pandemic due to COVID. And if they're the number one and number two sellers on Amazon, that's showing us that people are buying them right now. As of July, 98% of courses across the United States are open. Definitely can't say the same about a lot of other type of industries. Going off that same vein, they also have the number one best-selling golf ball on Amazon. For all the same reasons about COVID that I said, that's a great sign. And also the 6th or 7th, somewhere in there, they also have another top 10. And this is basically showing us that people are buying them right now, which is a really, really good sign. Considering their Q2 earnings are coming up on August 6th and their stock price is still pretty depressed, not only do I think this is a good investment long term and I plan on holding this for several years, I think it's also a pretty good investment short term because I think they're finally going to get the attention and the share price appreciation that they deserve. Another aspect I wanted to talk about that is slightly anecdotal and then also slightly theoretical, but there is some evidence to back it up. So on the anecdote side, I wanted to talk about how I got interested in golf and started playing golf about 1.5 years ago. And as I mentioned in a previous video, I'm 24. To give some perspective on my age demographic, I noticed in the last 1.5 years, a lot of people my age were starting to play golf. At first, I thought it was just a coincidence, but from what I've been seeing after doing more research into Callaway, there's definitely some evidence that younger people are starting to get into golf. I don't know if that's Topgolf, as I mentioned, driving some of that. I'm sure it's certainly helping, or people just graduating from college and if they're into business, it's a good networking tool. I'm not sure exactly what the driving force is, but the evidence is there that it's happening. Why is this important? Well, new people into golf means new purchases, whether that's recurring purchases like golf balls or gear. Callaway owns several different gear brands of clothing and things of that nature. But also, what's super important to note about this demographic thing is that play increased over the last several months during the pandemic. And as we know, the older demographic of people, the ones who are at risk from COVID, aren't going out. As I mentioned, I've been playing golf quite a bit. There are nowhere near as many of the old players out on the course as there used to be. And if you're any bit familiar at all with golf, in the past, traditionally, it was an older demographic game. There was a lot of, mid-age to older age people playing golf. So again, why I bring that up, and as I said, it's slightly anecdotal and slightly theoretical, which isn't the best, but considering there is some evidence, I do kind of stand by that reasoning that I do believe it's another benefit to Callaway stock. And considering newer, younger players getting into golf, not only, as I just mentioned, does it help Callaway stock, but it also helps their long-term growth. Which, going back to my two main philosophies, if you've watched my previous video on how I've had success in the stock market, Callaway isn't going anywhere, fulfills the first criteria of, is this company going to be around for a while? It absolutely is. Callaway's in like the top 3 name brands. When you think of golf, if you are familiar with it at all, you think of like Titleist, you think of TaylorMade, Callaway, it's up there in the name brand nature. It's not going anywhere. Secondly, for all the reasons that I mentioned about why I think golf is a great industry to get into right now and going forward, is I do think in the next 5 to 10 years, Callaway is going to grow. I think this younger age demographic, as I mentioned, is going to get more into golf. I think golf is going to continue to grow in places like Topgolf and other similar style facilities. That's only going to get people into the actual real game. And I think this is just ultimately going to help Callaway a lot. Granted, this is absolutely 100% just my opinion. Definitely don't take my financial advice without doing your own due diligence and formulating your own opinion. But enough blabbing from me. Let's get into some chart analysis and kind of go through what I believe may be happening in the short and to the long term of Callaway's stock price. All right, everyone, so let's dive into Callaway stock. So this is the 6-month 4-hour chart, and this is what we're going to be using the most for our short to medium term analysis. But really quickly, just to go back to the 3-year chart, we can see that this big drop right here, which happened in October of 2018, was because they acquired a outdoor apparel company called Jack Wolfskin's. Investors clearly didn't like it, and that's why it dropped so much. But it's actually been doing pretty well, and considering Callaway as a company has been doing pretty well, from around that $15 bottom in 2019, it climbed all the way up to 22, which was about 50% before the pandemic-induced crash. So if we go to the 6-month 4-hour chart, we can see that that previous high was $22, and since its low of $4.75, if we just choose around $5 and go up to the $19 or so it's at right now, that's been a 277% increase, which is pretty crazy. And granted, I wanted to mention that drawing lines on charts or any type of chart technical analysis is definitely opinion. You can draw whatever type of lines you want on it and get any type of outcome. There's definitely some bias in it, but there's also absolutely definitive facts that people can't deny, like the percentage gain I was saying, the fact that it's just continued to go up and up since its bottom. So it's clearly on an uptrend. There's really not been anything to show that that uptrend is not going to continue. And what's really important here, let me zoom back out really quickly and get the area I want, is that what was going on here, a technical term called an ascending triangle, was happening, where the supports were, which are the bottoms, were increasing. This low was lower than this one, and then this low was, although not much, still higher than this one, and this low was higher than this one. And the highs were about the same. This one was a little lower, and then this one was a little higher than this one, about the same as that one, and then this one kind of broke through that pattern. Now, if you Google an ascending triangle and kind of look into it, they form when there's about to be a breakout, and this one kind of showed that the breakout could potentially be there. In the last few days, if we kind of go to a 10-day chart, we can see this breakout kind of starting to happen, right? There's a little bit of a pullback here, and then it had another pretty big day today at the time of recording this. So why I think this is a great time to invest in Callaway stock? Well, as I said, the stock has absolutely recovered, but there's stocks that are higher than they were before COVID because they've benefited from it. If we look at Zoom, for instance, this chart is just almost parabolic. This was in April of 2020, and it had a little drop, and then it just kept going up. Now, Callaway hasn't even recovered, and in my opinion, not to the same extent as Zoom, but it's definitely benefited from COVID. More people are playing golf. Before I get off track, where I was going with that is there are earnings on August 6th, so just in a week and a half or so. So I think hopefully, even if the earnings aren't great, I think it's still going to bring attention to the company and to the fact that they're doing pretty well, because I think the earnings will be good. I can't predict the future. I could be absolutely wrong, but anyway, this is at least the technical analysis that I see, and let me know if you think it's useful for future videos. I could also make a video on some of the indicators I use, which are down here, the MACD indicator showing that it's a buy signal right now, and it's not necessarily oversold or overbought. This is the RSI indicator, and I could go over those more in depth, but let me know what you all think about this analysis, if I should continue doing it in future style videos like this. If you have any questions at all, let me know. Well, everyone, I sure hope you enjoyed this video. Definitely comment down below if you have any questions at all. If there's anything that you think I may have missed, I'd love to address it in the comments so that anybody else who may have the same question can see it there. So like the video if you liked it, subscribe to the channel if you're new and you'd like to see future content. I just wanted to reiterate again that investing in Callaway is opinion only. It's definitely not financial advice. It's something that I think is a good idea, but ultimately you need to form your own opinion, do your own due diligence, and decide if it's right for you. Thank you all so much for watching. I'm really looking forward to making future videos like this, and comment down below if there's any type of ideas or suggestions for future videos that you'd like me to make, and I'd be happy to do them. So thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.